Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the AMPC's final webinar for 2021. As you can see, we're in the Christmas spirit. We've got the Christmas decoration up behind. So we're setting the theme for December now. So we hope everyone is starting to get everything organised and looking forward to the festive season. Thanks everyone for joining today. Today's session is around a number of different knife sharpening initiatives that we've been working with Response and Peter from over in New Zealand. And we've also got Alan from New Zealand with us as well today. And Jeff, who's not on screen right at the moment, from Response as well. So they're going to take you through the bit of the journey of where we're up to with knife sharpening. Obviously, it's a passion of all of ours, and the main aim is to reduce injuries and make the work tasks easier for the employees, so we can continue to try and attract them. Over the past 20 odd years that we've all sort of been working in industry, lacerations and musculoskeletal injuries are still coming up as our #1 and #2 priority areas in terms of injury rates. So we're hoping by starting to look at a few things outside the square in terms of knife handle shapes and sizes, how cut resistant gloves play into it, and also a new app today that will be launched that everyone will be able to have access to around angles. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Scott, and Scott, I'll let you do the introduction for the rest of the team. Thanks everyone, and enjoy the session.
Okay, can you hear us there? No problems, Amanda?
Perfect.
Okay, thanks. So just a bit of context, everybody. Initially, this project was probably an extension of some research and development that was done over in New Zealand, probably back in 2005-06. I know Ellen Raupert is on the line, which is terrific, and they had a lot of success with this program originally, or part of the program, and reduced injuries by about 40% across the industry by using these systems. And this is just part of the whole project we've put together for the industry. So I'll just go through. I'm sure everyone can probably read there okay, but I'll just get a bit of this writing out of the way. So research and industry practices hang on, where's we going? Let's move this out of the way, sorry. Have determined that blunt knives can create a significant productivity decline and lead to numerous workplace injuries. We're really seeing it in the soft tissue industry area, and days lost. So what we've found is if you're using a longer length knife, it's going to take a lot more to cut through something. And if we can use shorter knives, so we're looking at different types of knives, different shape of knives, and originally from that original study over in New Zealand, we saw boning knives being used on legging stands and those sorts of things, which were probably a change of culture for a lot of us in Australia. And what we're trying to do now is bring a bit more technology into what we're doing to look at a lot more information to get better results out of our productivity and also our reduction in injuries. So we'll use new technology to implement effective knife sharpening training and practices that can be applied to the workplace. So the program runs for a couple of years for your injuries, and I'll go through a bit more about that in each of the sections. So there's basically 3 sections of this program. So that's basically our purpose, is to reduce injuries in the workplace and improve productivity outcomes. So this is part A. So I have a timeline at the end, and the timeline probably shows you all the bits and pieces that are happening on sites as we go through. But part A, obviously the safety improvements through knife sharpening. So we need to benchmark it initially. So we come on site and use an analyzer, which is called an Inago. Peter Dowd will be the next presenter that will come online, and he's in New Zealand and has been doing it for a number of years, and we've been working together for a long time on getting results, actual results, because you can go to any slaughterman and boner and they'll say, you've got a sharp knife. Well, then let's analyze it and actually see how sharp it is, where it's sharp on the blade, are you using the full length of your blade, those sorts of things. It analyses a lot of depth in what we're getting out of it. So that's going to be analysed right up front, and then at 6 months and 12 months, there'll be a trainer on site for 1 week a month. That trainer is to get the analysation done, but also work on probably your bottom 30% of your workforce and try to get their knives up to over 8.5 on the scale. And that's a fairly big task and a lot of work to work beside them. But what I see as the benefit of the program is trying to help the sites implement a system that is sustainable for the future. So we'll collect and analyse all the data injury for the last 3 years and new injuries where knife sharpness may have been a contributing factor. So if they are getting repetitive strain injuries and those sorts of things, or cuts, let's look at what they're using and what they've done and what sort of rehab we're doing to try to minimise those injuries. Conduct the knife sharpening programs on site for trainers to encourage ongoing success of the program. Design and develop new SOPs and work instructions for knife sharpening specific to the sites. Some of the sites are actually setting up, we've got about 1, 2, 3, 4 that are going to kick off now, and some have already started. And we've got SOPs and work instructions developed so that we've got safety in mind and room for the machinery and those sorts of things. We can use existing machinery, and I'll get into that more down the track, but you can also purchase new machinery as well. And we report on improvements and reductions in workplace injuries over the term of the project. So that's done over basically 2 years, but we're on site for the first 12 months. This bit here, the Preventure side, I'll go into this a little bit, but Preventure have been used by a number of large organisations across Australia, like Vic Rail, Bunnings Australia, and I know they're doing sports science with some of the Olympic team to look at stress on parts of the body, and we're hoping to kick that off in middle of January with one site, and they put electrode on their arms, like they like electrodes, and Amanda can adjust what I say, but it basically shows the strength and the usage of the arm. And what we'll be doing is analysing the knives 3 times a day for up to 30 people on your site for 2 weeks is what this initial one is. And then we're going to collect that data and basically see if the analysing of the scores are low scores, or they're using a lot more force, and then be able to get champions out of that for people that could actually train the others on what they're doing differently to make their job easier. And so this will actually hopefully reduce a lot of injuries and create a culture of trying to get to the top and really help the bottom end of our workforce. So that's basically what they've got: wearable technology, and it goes through their phone. Each of the people can see how their energy is being used each day, and it'll probably end up like a bit of a competition, I suppose, for them to see if they're actually improving and what they're doing to make the difference. And if they sharpen their knives really well and then they can see the results, well, then hopefully it creates a positive culture. So that's...
This is the technology here.
Sorry, mate?
This is the technology I'm showing on my screen. Now, it just fits on the back of the claw, and that fits up on the top of the arm, and it measures stress. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, mate. Good on you. So is that still on my screen? Can you still see my screen now? Yep. So part C is also about a bit of innovation and a bit of technology and just trialing different things. And this has been the bit that probably excites a lot of our trainers a lot, and really seeing change being adapted and working with. So we've developed a knife sharpening and sealing app. One of the things that is probably the most important is I can usually train a brown Labrador to sharpen a knife, but to try to keep their knife sharp, it's a whole different ball game. So keeping a knife sharp in production is what the key to what we need to do. And training the people to actually steel correctly so that they get their edge. And by that I mean, if you sharpen a knife at 20 degrees and you steel it at 15, well, then you're not getting your edge at all. You're actually hitting your shoulder. And so this steeling app will teach people to make sure they get the right angles. Otherwise, all they do is roll the edge straight off and they've got a blunt knife for the day. And that happens with so many new people. So that's what the app's going to design to help people to see what they're doing wrong themselves and correct it. The research and review knife sharpening equipment that are currently being used across the industry. We are looking at lots of different steels and knife shape design, as I say, diamond stones versus whetstones, and a broader look at different equipment and coming up with a best practice model for what we're doing. And obviously also analysing your high grinders as well. So undertaking a review of potentially new technologies where here and overseas that may be implemented. So we are closely aligned with the New Zealand people and are getting knives from a lot of the knives from Victory Knives. So we've brought in some smaller handle knives for a lot of the smaller foreign people that are working in the industry at the moment. We've had feedback forms out and we're getting tremendous success on the small handles. We've now set up for a larger size handle, and it's a bit like a shoe size. So you might have 3 different shoe sizes and you can put your hand on the wall and 3 different sizes of your hand with the recommendation of the size handle that would suit your hand. And if we can get those ergonomics right, well, then it's going to be a lot easier for these people. They're not going to have the strains and sprains. And that's what we're aiming for. We'll have a report and make recommendations of new equipment to improve safety and productivity across the sites. And then obviously the integrating of all the technologies together. Each of these sections will probably have a little bit more information, but one of the ones in the previous one was about the PPE gloves. So I got Peter Dowd to do a report on that, and he'll present on this next. But there's a lot of different standards. Well, there's 3 different standards in the world, and that's on the cutting force of protective equipment. And Peter will go into that more, and it's got some fairly interesting results out of that. So as we say here, Part A is a long-term PIP. So a PIP is a plan-initiated project, which Amanda can go through a bit more about, but each site basically applies for it. And we seek to enhance knife sharpening in sites through the provision of specialist response services. So as I say, it'll be a trainer on each site for a week, a month. And usually we analyse what the site is. So if it's a lamb site, we'll try to get a lamb slaughterman or boner to be involved with that site. And or a beef, we get a beef person. And so that's really honing in on what we've done previously with a few of the projects we've done. We're trying to support the sites to get their own systems up and running and really trying to hone in on the reduction in injuries. Part B works with Part A, and as I said, we're doing 90 assessments of the analysing per day, because we're going to be getting 30 people with the Preventure machinery on, and we'll do 30 assessments at the start, middle, and at the end of the day. So that's how they both work together. There'll be a report written about that, and then hopefully that may be implemented across a number of sites to really support the championship of training, I suppose you'd call it. Part C supports Part A in the project by providing data on the employees or employees-based basis, and it can be analysed in conjunction with Part B of the project. So the Part C also works with Part A in reduction of injuries by looking at your knife use and all the machinery we're involved with to try to improve systems and make it a bit easier for the workers to work on the job. So we will be looking at, certainly the lengths of knives is one that has been a cultural belief that if the best boner uses a 7-inch knife, well, then you've got to use one of those. And we want to be able to try to break that down and then show people that you may not need that length knife, put it that way. So this is the data right across each week of each month of the year, and all the bits and pieces that we're actually doing across the project. Anyone that's interested, I can sort of send this out, and it really gives you a detailed information of what we're doing on a monthly basis. I won't go into a terrible lot of detail with this, but the knife app will be, we're now on version 3 and it's ready to be released. So I'll have to get some information on how everyone can link in and get that. But there is some training information on how it's used. And then our trainers will be on site, and every person they are with will get the app as well. So we want to get that out, and AMPC has sponsored that, and so it's free to anyone. So that's it for me at the moment. I'll get Peter Dowd now to go through his results from his research on the cut-resistant gloves, and then after that we'll have Jeff O'Malley, who's one of our trainers. Been a boner for a long time and a training manager, and he'll go through the knife app and show you the process of what goes on in the knife app. And then I'll be back over to Amanda. But thanks everyone for my part, and I'll pass on to Peter Dow.
Thanks, Scott. And if anyone's got any questions just while Peter's setting up, please feel free to, you've got a question tab on your toolbar. Please feel free to type your questions in, and we will endeavour to get the presenters to answer as many questions as we can throughout the day. Thanks, Peter.
Very good. Can I confirm that people can see that screen? I've shared the right one?
Yes, we can. Yeah, it's just not in presentation mode.
No, until now. Very good. Thanks, Robbo. Thanks guys for inviting me on. So as Robbo mentioned, we did a bit of an investigation trying to understand cut-resistant gloves. So the situation we found was that cut-resistant gloves are popular, quite understandably. They're a lot more flexible than chainmail gloves. They're warmer, they're cheaper, and also, quite importantly, you can wear them on your knife hand, and so therefore we get some protection from run-through injuries. However, there's quite a lot of anecdotal evidence that a glove is not the same as necessarily another glove that supposedly has the same protection rating. And yet the gloves supplied do have certification stamps on them that generally indicate the highest, a level of 5 on the EN388 test. So what Response asked us to do was to have a look and see are there real differences between gloves that match the anecdotal concerns, and if so, what might actually be the reason for that? Is it because manufacturers are somehow beating the system so that they don't really have a 5, but they can get through the system? Or is there something in the certification? Essentially, can we find a reason for it? And we also want to get a bit of a feel for the cut force required to cut these different gloves. So what we did, we set up a little customization rig on one of our sharpness testers, and you can see it here where we have a clamping mechanism that holds a portion of a glove, and the knife comes through and can then cut that glove, and we therefore measure the force required to cut through that glove, and you can see how that force changes as it cuts through the glove as well. What we found is that as we have been told, the different gloves did perform differently, even though they did have the same rated protection of, you can see on the right hand side there, of EN388 level 5, which is the top level for that standard. We also discovered, quite interestingly, that a knife with a rough edge was much easier to cut the gloves with a knife with a rough edge than it was with a knife with a smooth edge. So in fact, to do these tests, we roughened the edges of the blades to improve the cuttability, I suppose. So to explain some of these graphs on the right, the top one is showing the difference between two gloves with the same test on our modified tester. And what we can see is one glove required around about 30 to 50% more force to cut than another glove, again, both of them with the same rating. We also noticed here on this graph, the blue line was the first cut we did with a knife, and in this case we've intentionally roughed up the edge, and then we've done three cuts in a row through different, through new sections of glove, but without doing anything to the blade. And what we can see is that the force required to cut has actually gone up. And what we noticed as well is that as it's cutting the glove, it's actually smoothing off the edge, pulling off burrs and making it more difficult for the knife to cut. So that was quite an interesting result. And as we can see on the standard sharpness graph we get from the tester, is that this low, in fact really dull blade was the rough one that actually cut the gloves more easily. So a bit of a side discovery we had was that a rough blunt knife, the gloves do not really provide that much protection against. They were much more protective against a smooth edge. We also discovered there's a lot of standards out there. Three main ones in particular. The EN388 is the one that you most commonly see quoted on gloves, and that but they're not consistently used, these three, and we can and the most common one is 388 is actually not relevant to meat processing looking at it. The diagram we have on the bottom shows around about how it works. It has a rotating blade. That rotating blade reciprocates backwards and forwards across a section that's cut out of the palm of the material. So again, not the fingers where a run through might actually happen, but of the palm. And it only has 500 grams of force on it. And if you can, if you think about how much force people are actually putting on, that's not a lot of force at all. Also, what has been discovered over time is that once this little rotating wheel dulls, which apparently it does quite quickly, then your glove will last as long as you like and get a 5. So there are two things that really came out of this test that I could see. One is that, or three things. One, the force is way too low to be really relevant for what we're doing in the meat industry. Two, having this rotating blade going backwards and forwards and getting dull really meant that after a second or maybe potentially less, you're really not getting much useful information out of it, and doesn't really help. And the third is that the test is performed on a section cut from the palm of a glove. So you could have a very different thread formulation on your fingers, and you could pass the test on the palm of the glove, but not on the fingers. I'm not saying that's happening, but the test would permit that. So what we found was that there's multiple certification standards, and it does create confusion trying to understand what's happening. all of the protocols, even the one that I would say we recommend, only evaluate the palm of the glove and don't include the fingers. To be fair, there is a pretty good reason for that. As soon as you chop one of the fingers off these gloves, they basically shrivel up into a skinny little tube that is just a bit annoying to try to use. So we actually had a way of testing the clamp where we didn't have that problem. And also the scores you get from the different tests are not directly comparable. They kind of look like they are because they have a rating out of 5 or a letter rating, but because they're measuring different things, you can't really say a 5 is the same as a 5 on another, or a 5 is the same as a 3. They just measure slightly different things. That EN388, that KU test, it is the standard, and yet, I will say quite openly that I would say it's essentially meaningless for our industry. And that category 5 just means it's dulled the test blade, really. And so all gloves should be category 5, but that doesn't tell us really anything above that. The picture on the right illustrates the same machine can be used for the ISO 13997, but also the ANSI 105. And this machine is designed to, again, it has a section of the glove, the blue. It presses up, and then essentially a razor blade is attached, and it reciprocates. It moves across that section of glove. A difference in this testing protocol is that this blade is changed after every reciprocation. So you've always got a sharp edge going over the material. Obviously, that means it takes longer because you've got to change the blade and it's more expensive, but it is more realistic because you're not dulling the blade. Here's just an example of the machine where you can have a variable load. It also enables you to vary that force. And how these tests work is the rating you get is based on the force that is required in order to get cut through. That's getting through the material onto the conductive surface beneath it, to get cut through within a 20mm stroke of that razor blade. And then that force becomes the rating. So from what we looked at here, the minimum level for meat processing, and this is based, to be fair, on my experience rather than on extensive research, my experience of the forces that people are applying or can apply when they're meat processing. So we've got here 30 newtons. So 30 newtons, round about-ish, divided by 10, so that's 3 kilos. So people can, as you know, in some parts of tasks, be putting in more than that. And that's an F for the ISO 13997. And F is actually the highest rate, the maximum rating for the ISO. So you get no resolution above it. And that's actually why I recommend, if we're going to look at implementing a standard, recommend a standard for the industry, that we actually go for the ANSI 105 2016, and for a minimum of A6, which again is 30 plus newtons. However, you get the opportunity to have resolution above that. So if you want to have a task that, there's a task where there's a higher risk, you can actually have scope to specify that. We discovered, as I mentioned before, that bluff roughness has a significant effect on the efficacy of cut resistance. So essentially, what we want people to do is have smooth edges, because as well as we've discovered in the past with other research, that you get superior, you get superior sharpness, less cutting force, your cut resistant glove will also be more effective. And yet there's no consideration of edge roughness in the cut resistance test protocols. And so because of the impact of the variables of sharpness, especially edge roughness, it's actually not possible, I don't believe it's possible to give a reliable opinion on the suitability of a given glove at the moment for the meat processing industry based on the standards, because you could give somebody a glove that could generally be very good, but if they're not good at knife sharpening and have a really rough edge, that glove could be useless. Or vice versa, the same glove could be brilliant, or even a slightly lesser glove could be brilliant for somebody who keeps a nice smooth edge. So overall, the recommendations that we've got is the implementation of the AMPC 105 2016 with a minimum rating of A6. So obviously, you know, it's pretty preliminary research we did. You'd probably want to do a bit more confirmation just to make sure you know that was an appropriate level. And also, I think it's really worthwhile investigating the impact of edge roughness on the efficacy of cut-resistant gloves, because that was, I'll admit, a surprise to discover that had such an impact. And certainly understanding that, and perhaps seeing if there's a way people can evaluate for it, that would be useful. Plus also making sure that we put into our knife sharpness training programs, training around making sure people do have smooth edges. Because the good thing about it, it is a win-win. They're going to be able to cut more easily, and testing with evaluation done in the past shows even on slaughter tasks, on pelleting tasks, on boning tasks, a smooth edge is better and has significantly less cut-in force than a rough edge, regardless of what we'd been told in the past by people. So, you know, that's my recommendations there. And yeah, back to you, Amanda.
Thanks, Peter. Well, it's good information, because when you look at it, your new starters are the ones that usually got rough edges on their knives. And so if we can reduce the injury on those new starters, and it's the same thing as they struggle with the sharpening, and I can see a real area of improvement for us. The next person to come on as a presenter is Jeff O'Malley. Just been in the industry for probably 25 years plus. He doesn't look that old, but he's got a few whiskers growing now. That's good on you. But he'll go through the knife sharpening app, the Angle Me, and show you that. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Robbo. So I've just got a video here showing the
Jeff, you've just frozen. I don't know if you can. Do you want to try maybe turning your camera off to share the video?
Right, camera off. Is that any better?
Can hear you better. We just can't.
Yep.
Correct.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Cool. All right. So the Angle Me app was developed to help training for people to improve their steeling angles by being able to slow down a video that we take of them and be able to show them where they're actually struggling. All right, so this is basically how it works. So you've got your intro screen when you open the app. So when you start, you'll press the little plus button and use your camera. Then you can record your video, and then when you play it back, you can pause at different points in the video and measure the angles that you're steeling at. We can set the target of the angle that we're looking to measure. So when we're steeling, we want to be steeling at the same angle that we sharpen at. And we can use the angles which change colors to indicate whether you are steeling at the correct angle, whether you're just off it, or if you're way off it. So if it's correct, it'll be green. If you're a couple of degrees out, it'll be yellow. And if you're completely off, so you're not getting the angle at all, the angle will show up as red. So we can freeze frame it, play it back at a slower rate, and all the angles will also be embedded at a certain point in the video, so you can go back or skip back to that frame to check that angle by pressing the button up the top. So after we finish the assessment, we can add our names or the name of the trainee, the company and location they work at, and it'll give a result, and you can save that to your device and you can use it later on. All right, the app is available in the Apple App Store and also for Android as well on the Android Play Store, whatever that one is. Sorry, I'm not an Android user myself. But as Scott said, they are free. Just search for AMPC Angle Me.
If the one thing I see from the Angle Me is that you can actually freeze frame it as you go down the blade. So a lot of people actually change their angle from when they're at the top right through to the bottom. So they may start very well and then come in fine. You can actually analyse it as you go down the blade, down the steel, to make sure that you're getting the same angle all the way through. And that's why a lot of people have blunt tips on their knives, because they bring it fine as they get to the point. So that's something that will be able to be measured as you go along.
Correct.
Terrific. I think that's about all for us at the moment. Amanda, I'm sure there's a few questions and I'm happy to answer, or Jeff or Peter.
So one question that came through, and I'm actually going to throw this across to Alan, is how's the knife sharpening, and is there sort of, with the work that I know you've been doing in New Zealand, have you seen sort of significant benefits over time in the processing plants by having that systematic training system?
Yeah, well, it still works and it's still being used. The system hasn't changed much from when I last came over there with it. So what's happening with this Angle Me is the very thing that actually turns the lights on for most people. Once they can see that their angle looking from behind the knife, if you like, and looking down at it is a little bit different than looking from the front, which the Angle Me lets you see. And so that hasn't changed over here at all. We still use the same technique and still have the same results, but with the Angle Me, they're instantly there. You have to pull these people out to a training room to actually see that. But with it being on a device like a phone, you can basically stand next to them on the job and show them. You can record it. So I like what's happening with it. But yeah, our system hasn't changed much at all. I think everyone's tried to, but I think filming the angles, stealing angles is the right way to go. A lot of people, when they see it, they actually get it. They know what's happening straight away. And that's what I think this, for me, is going to give to a lot of people. They'll see it straight away. And the ability to correct it is quite quick. That's a good thing about stealing. Quicker you can correct it, the result is almost instant. So yeah, nothing much has changed, Amanda. It's pretty much still the same.
Yep, being able to provide
that's
feedback.
from my side.
Yeah, that real-time feedback through the AngleMe app will be fantastic. And I think, Jeff, this question is probably directed at you. Was the AngleMe footage taken real-time during operations? And have you been able to use it like on floors in operational time, or have you been using it mainly in the training room?
I've personally used it both in operations and in the training room. A lot of the work that I do with the AngleMe app has been in the training room, but I have been in just this week actually to actually do some work with a trainee to improve his stealing technique, and I did it on the floor and showed it back to him as he was working. So we could fix up slight problems with his angles with stealing right there and then.
Fantastic. And I believe that there's other applications for the AngleMe app. Jeff, do you want to, I don't know, from animal welfare standards and things like that. So what other applications do you see that it could be used in because it's on your phone and readily available?
So we can also use it to measure ramp angles for unloading of livestock to ensure that they remain within the animal welfare guidelines. So yeah, that's a pretty handy thing to have, and we're always looking at other ways you can use it as well.
And a question has come through: can the AngleMe app be used in stoning when you're stoning?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I could. Yes, I don't see any reason why I couldn't be. If you can get in front of the stone and line it up square with the knife and the stone, definitely you could measure your angles stoning.
Fantastic. Just quickly, Scott mentioned around the PIP, and there's been a question sort of come in around expanding that. So I might just talk quickly about the PIP process. So any of the AMPC members that pay a levy into AMPC, you'll have a PIP allocation, and each member has what we call a co-innovation manager. So most of you will hopefully know who your co-innovation manager is at the moment. So we've got Gemma Harper in Victoria, Blair Bryce in Western Australia, David Dwyer, Greg Williams, and myself looking after sort of, well, Greg and Dave are New South Wales, Queensland, and I look after some of the southern plants and the border plants. So feel free to reach out to any of us, and if you don't know who that is, I can definitely put you in contact with them. But essentially how it works is you get supported through what we call a plant initiated project, and it works on a 25-25-50 basis. So a plant would put in 25% cash contribution, 25% will come out of your levies, and that would be matched by 50% federal government matched funding for anything in the R&D space. And because we're collecting a lot of data around knives and knife sharpening and trying to improve, we would definitely fit the guidelines of R&D. So if you'd like more information, please get in contact with your AMPC representative or give me a call and we can discuss that further. Pete, one for you in terms of, you know, where from the research that you've seen, and where do you sort of see industry should go in terms of standards or redesigns of gloves? What's your sort of thoughts in that space?
Sure. With regard to redesign, Am I coming through okay? Not too,
Yep.
yeah. With regard to redesign of gloves, I can't give any, I think, good advice on that, because that's the design of gloves is not my expertise. With regard to the standard, I would say implementing that ANSI standard is the way to go. The only reason not to would be if no one meets it, but I would expect some people must meet it. Yeah, that certainly that would be the next step, is to have a look at, are there gloves available that meet, you know, ANSI 105? Are there is A6 you know, a reasonable level? But what I do like about the industry doing that is that it'll just be so much more useful than what we're currently getting, where someone says, oh, we've got a you know, grade 5 glove, it's class 5 glove, it's all good, when actually it's pretty meaningless. And the other that would, I don't know, I suppose that just the geek in me, I'd be interested in the impact of the edge roughness. But I think if you more just had a focus on making sure people kept their edges smooth, then, you know, maybe that gets around it. Yeah.
It'd be interesting, Amanda, to do a cost-benefit analysis on the different sites using different standards and the amount of cuts and return on investment. But that's a whole different ballgame. But obviously, the higher standard is a lot harder to cut through. But yet the standard is all rated exactly the same, all three of them.
Yep.
As a rating, yeah.
Thank you. Jeff, another one for you. Angle is one variable. Are other variables taken into consideration? Sorry, you're on mute, Jeff.
Sorry. So the app will measure all your angles, but when we train for steeling, we do explain things like different amounts of pressure to straighten the edge out, depending on how the knife is running and how far over the edge is rolled. Types of steels. And also types of steels.
Great, thank you. And just one last comment. I know one or two people were having trouble logging into the webinar to start with, and some people missed the very first part of the presentation. It has been recorded and it will be up on the AMPC YouTube channel tomorrow, by tomorrow. So feel free to share that. And I also know that a lot of your supervisors and production staff are actually still in production. So feel free to share that link around to anyone that is interested and passionate about knife sharpening. So just in closing, I'd like to thank all the presenters today for all the background research that they have been doing in improving knife safety across our industry. I still believe there is more room, and you know, it will be very interesting to see the work that comes out with Preventure and the work that comes across from doing the pips across plants and also that knife handling side of it. So it will be a very interesting journey. And in terms of research at AMPC, if anyone does see anything or has an idea, please get in contact with us, because you know that those sparks around a conversation, you never know where that can lead. And you know, we're all in this to improve safety, productivity, and the overall well-being of the workforce. So while I've been talking, we've had a couple more questions come in. So a question for Pete. Can existing Inago units be used to test gloves at plants?
Yes, they can. We need to supply one of those little clampy things that we had, and just take you through a protocol. And it's not quite the same. There's a little process you've got to go through to cut the gloves, etc. But yeah, no reason why you can't. We used our normal software to run it.
Great. So Colin, it might be worth you getting in touch with Peter if you want directly to find out a bit more information about that. And if you don't have Pete's contact details, just shoot me an email and I'll share those with you. Another one that's come in for you, Robbo. You mentioned at the start around different knife handles to suit the size of different hands. Is there anywhere that people can purchase those to use, or where are the manufacturers up to in that space at the moment?
That's a good question. So we're going through Victory Knives, and they developed the smaller handles and the larger handles. We're still waiting for the larger handles to be produced and sent out to us. But I'm sure if you get hold of your Argus or someone that has got suppliers of Victory knives, you might be able to get them. But at the moment, they're all in trial. And we're putting probably 30 or 40 into every site to trial, and we've got heaps of feedback. And the feedback on the small ones, we're using a small one with a 4-inch boner, and it seems to be working really well. Al, you've been using them over there as well, mate. What was your feedback? You're on mute, mate.
Smaller handles you're talking about? Yeah. It did suit those with smaller hands, but those that have got a slightly bigger hand have got accustomed to the normal handle. So smaller handle actually felt a bit too small for a lot of the women that were using it. The ones with the smaller hands, they had no problem, but there weren't many of those people. So the majority, they got accustomed to the normal handle. Probably the only difference would be that the length of the blade for some felt better shorter than it did longer.
Because I know one thing with the smaller handle, just for information, is they couldn't really put the 5-inch blade into the small handle because the tang and the pressure on it wouldn't work as well. So they're all trialing this stuff, and it's sort of a bit of innovation we've got to work with. But the 4-inch boner works really well, and we did have another one which was a drop point, which is like a probably a hunting knife, I suppose. And they come in a pouch as well. So if you've got QA sampling and those sorts of things, they can carry them around. So there's a few different knives we're trialing at the moment in different shapes. So we will have a report about that and have a catalogue of all the ones we're trialing, I suppose, and say the results as well.
And I think Scott, I think it'll be really interesting once we can try and get some data with the Preventure technology as well to see if we can actually measure any significant difference around different knife handle sizes and knife blade lengths with different employee demographics. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the results out of that report, and we will share that with across industry far and wide once we can. And Pete, sorry, you've got a question?
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment on the handle sizes. I'm not sure if you've been in contact with Dexter Russell, the manufacturer in the States. It'd be worth having a chat with them. I know that the poultry industry in the States use a lot of the very small handles, ones that they're significantly smaller than your standard size handle. And I don't know the largest or the longest blade length they put in those. They'd certainly be worth having a chat to.
Yeah. Thanks, Pete.
And further to that, I was at a meeting the other day with, it was around exoskeletons actually, but in America in the poultry industry, and we're going to try and get a couple of them. They've got the smallest exoskeleton out, and it's actually one that sits on a thumb, and it's to help with knives. So I think that will be really good to help join into this sort of research that's being done to see if we can evaluate if there's any improvement by using a mini exoskeleton as well on your thumb. It was really tiny and quite cute if you're a little bit warped like I am. So stay tuned on that one as well.
About 6'6" and 120 kilos.
Yeah, just a quick question, fellas. I just want to know, how small can the angle mean measure? This might be way out of touch, but if you were to try and measure the angle of the bevel you've created on that blade, could it do that?
Ooh.
I mean, if you blew the image up, could you measure it?
Good question. I'll try and give that a go for you.
Only because I'm curious to see how exact that bevel is. Then you'll probably actually know how well that steeling is going to be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, Jeff?
I think you probably hit the resolution limits of the camera. That's probably going to be a big limit.
Yeah.
If there's a good enough image, I'm sure Jeff will be able to get that angle.
But
Might be able to microscope it and take the photo shot from the microscope or through the glass.
Take it from a factory ground east knife or something like that and see if you can do it.
That's good, Al.
Something we've done in the past is actually use those little USB cameras, those little USB microscopes, and you can get a good enough image with those that you'd probably get a feel for that bevel angle.
And now that's probably only needed if you're doing freestone. If we're doing it on like a setter or a Lansky, it's got a set angle on it anyway, so it should be right. But I'm with you, especially if we had a little bit of knife on a freestone, they could change angles as they're going along the blade of the stone.
Yeah. I wonder if that angle changes over time.
Yeah.
On a Lansky or a setter. Just a thought.
Right. Well, just in closing, I'd like to thank all the presenters today, again, for a very informative session. We've had some really good feedback on this session. So please feel free to reach out to anyone on the webinar today if you'd like further information or if you would like to be involved in any part of the research. We'd be very keen to have as many people involved in the research as we possibly can. So in closing, thanks again, and this concludes the AMPC webinars for 2021, and next year we will be getting back out on the road and we will be doing some network meetings. The first one will be back in New South Wales in Dubbo on the 22nd and 23rd of February. At this stage it's scheduled for, and we'll be going around the different states, so we'll make sure that we send out all that information, and we hope to see lots of people face to face. We will also continue to do some webinars because the feedback we have got is they've been very beneficial for a lot of people to be able to get information in a relatively quick time. So in closing, have a very Merry Christmas and look forward to a wonderful 2022 where we can start seeing a lot more people in person. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. See everybody.
Hey, Amanda, you've got a work health and safety conference as well next year, is it?
Yes, yeah, we are also going to be running a work health and safety conference. It will be in June. At this stage, it's tentatively the 1st and 2nd of June, but those dates are yet to be confirmed. And it's going to be a really different conference with a lot of different out of industry speakers as well, is part of the aim, so that we can sort of be thinking outside the square. But we also want to make sure that, you know, research such as the knife sharpening is also presented, and that you have that opportunity to have some tactile sessions where you can go and have a chat. So make sure you stay out, keep a lookout for that one. Thanks, Robbo, that was a great value add. Excellent. All right, we'll see you all, if not at the end of this year, into 2022.
Thank you.
All right.
See you.
Bye.